Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Welcome. My name is Nathalie Trenaman. I work as the IP6 program manager. Better is getting slides up, yeah. I am here today to give you a bit of an update on IPv6, what is happening with IPv6, and how things are going. I have a bit of a cold, so might need some water. Despite what people say, IPv6 is happening, and it is happening a lot in the world, and also quite close around us. And as you can see, we normally have a look at the Google statistics. And the Google statistics show us the end users that access google.com and YouTube over IPv6. Sorry. Now this percentage has doubled in the last 12 months, and experts think that this number will double again in the next 12 months. So that means that by the end of 2016, around 18% of all the internet users will access Google over IPv6. That's a lot. Now, why do people implement IPv6? Because we see these high numbers. And I asked many providers and content providers why they are doing IPv6. And of course, the number one reason is IPv4 depletion. For example, if we talk to a large provider in Belgium, IPv4 depletion was the main reason for their IPv6 deployment. They were just simply running out and didn't want to buy large quantities of IPv4. Now, the case in Belgium is interesting because you will see later a graph where Belgium is leading the world in IPv6 end-user numbers. And that is basically because there were two providers, actually three, who started running a test all at the same time. And Belgium had an IPv6 task force. And an IPv6 task force, I don't think you have one in the Ukraine, but correct me if I'm wrong, is a group of people from different providers, content, residential, business providers, sometimes government, that sit together on a regular basis and discuss the progress and where they can exchange some information. And Belgium has one of those IPv6 task forces that was actually quite successful. So IPv4 depletion. Then I talked to a very large web shop, and the web shop has a different problem. They said we need to do IPv6 as a business continuity decision. Why is that? Well, if you have a web shop, the most important thing, apart from selling your products, is you want to know who your customers are. So you do business analytics on your website. And business analytics with double or triple net or proxies is quite problematic. So you don't know who your end users are. So this web shop said, if a customer comes native over IPv6, let's make our website, our web shop, and everything around it native on IPv6 so we know who these people are. So they don't have to use different proxies or translations or tunnels or these kind of things. So that we can actually know who these users are and what they buy, so we can send them recommendations for other products in a better way. So that is from a web shop perspective an important reason to do IPv6. If you have providers in the middle who have to do transitioning mechanisms, that might give problems for your analytics. So catch those users over IPv6 as soon as a provider is offering IPv6 to end users. And this is not a small web shop. This is actually a web shop with only 500 staff IT let alone all the other people around it, but 500 IT people. Now, Apple also made quite a big statement. Did you hear about that in the news? You probably did. Apple said all the apps submitted to the App Store must support IPv6 in iOS 9, but actually it said early 2016. And what does this mean? I digged into this because if you look at the App Store today, how many of the apps in the App Store do you think work with IPv6? Who says less than 20%? Can I see a hand if you think less than 20% in the apps in the App Store can work with IPv6? Less than 20. So the rest of you think it's more than 20% of the apps in the App Store support IPv6. Well, the majority is right, even though you were maybe not listening. Actually, 85% of the apps in the App Store today supports IPv6. And that's not because they actually support IPv6, that is because they are IP agnostic. Most apps don't care about IP, luckily. So Apple's, okay, 85% is not a bad score, but 15%, in those 15%, there are quite some big apps. For example, Twitter, for example, WhatsApp, and Skype is another one. And basically, for new apps, you have to support IPv6 or be IP agnostic. But Apple didn't really make a clear statement if a new version of Twitter would be considered a new submission to the App Store, or if it was just an update and not a new submission. So I'm still not completely sure with this new big Apple announcement that apps like Twitter or Skype will actually support IPv6 at the beginning of 2016. So this is an interesting scenario. Because the parties that run out of IPv4 and have to do IPv6 relatively quick are the growing markets, and those are mobile providers. So mobile providers, of course, want to do native IPv6 and give a cell phone just an IPv6 address, because that's simpler for them than just do all this trickery with, for example, transitioning mechanisms as NAT64, 464 XLAT. So Apple said, okay, we're going to help those mobile users by saying new apps must support IPv6. Then we have large social media platforms. For example, in this example I mentioned Facebook. IPv6 is important for us as we pursue our mission of helping the world connect and share online. Yesterday we saw a presentation from Svetlana, and she said that, correct me if I'm wrong, around 40%, there is still 40% of the people in Ukraine that could use potentially an internet connection. We cannot connect those people with IPv4. This is simply not going to scale. Also in other growing economies, we see this problem where we cannot just add more people, more devices, smart cities and those kind of things. So that's why big content providers are vk.com as well, say people can access us over IPv6. Again, it helps also with the analytics so they know who their users are. So that's an important one for content providers. Now, if we look a bit at where people implement IPv6, this is just an overview of the 5 regional internet registries, a bit like the slide Axel showed earlier. And you can see that between 15 and 25% of the AS numbers in the world, on average, announce an IPv6 prefix. So that's a little bit higher than end users. And we can zoom in a bit in the right region in a moment. But as you can see, LACNIC, Latin America, they are having quite a steep increase all of a sudden. And I'm trying to get my contacts to see what's actually going on there, because it's quite a remarkable growth. And also for the Aryan region, the red line, you see a little spike going up there. Maybe that has to do with the IPv4 run out recently, that people, AS numbers are now announcing more IPv6. We will see. Now, this slide, a lot of people do measurements about IPv6. And this graph I took from stateoftheinternet.com, and it's from Akamai, and it basically looks at the statistics from APNIC on end users, also for Google on end users, and makes a list of the top, I think, 200 of countries with IPv6 end user deployments. And as you can see, Belgium, currently 1/3, so around 35% of all the Belgian people connect to Google or any other possible website over IPv6. This is a very high number, but we see other countries as well moving in. So a bit of an update about this top 10, what they are doing right. And Belgium is having, like I said, 2 or 3 providers that are rolling out quite actively. And they have an IPv6 task force that enables them to spread knowledge. And actually we see the same happening in Switzerland. Switzerland, the number 2, they also have an IPv6 task force, very active, and bring together experts and presentations from all the different internet providers that do something with IPv6. Now, in all honesty, Switzerland looks a little bit better than it actually is. Because the biggest provider in Switzerland is Swisscom, and they tunnel their IPv6 traffic over an IPv4 connection. So it's a little bit cheating. But still, they are work in progress very actively to provide IPv6 and make that work. Then, of course, America. Well, America, you know, Erin recently ran out. There is a big demand for IPv4 addresses in America, especially in the mobile market. And if you look at the deployments in America, you can see that those deployments are mostly from mobile operators. So we expect a larger growth there as well. Also, of course, Comcast and Time Cable Warner, they are also having big deployments. Again, America has an American IPv6 task force. Peru, very quickly, is a bit of a strange-looking country in this top 10, but this is actually O2 running it was the first deployment of, Telefonica in the world, and they chose Peru as the country to do that trial. So that is why Peru is there. This is Telefonica running a national big, well, it started as a trial and now they are going in production. Quickly going, Germany, Portugal, they have been in the list already for quite a while. Luxembourg as well. But I want to take you to the number 8 and 9, because they are very new to the list. If you look 2 months ago, they were not even in the top 30, 40. So now suddenly they have larger numbers, so I want to show you a bit how they did that, where this comes from. Greece is one of them, and Greece has 2 large providers in the country, OTEnet and Fortnet, and it's again a little bit the same story as Belgium. 2 providers, and they were battling each other in the IPv6 task force, challenging each other, saying, by the end of this year, I will have a trial with 15,000 users. And then the other one said, by the end of the year, I have a trial with 20,000 users. And they were battling. And basically, both did a trial for 15,000 users, quite a small group, to see if their help desk would get overloaded. And Jan Zors yesterday did a presentation. Help desks, if you do a proper IPv6 rollout, help desks will not get overloaded. And that was the case in Greece, but also in Belgium. They all did a trial with a subset of customers to see what would be the impact on the help desk, and there was not much. But also they used social media to tell each other how they were doing and what the progress was. So that was open in the media as well. Both admitted in presentations that IPv4 shortage was the direct threat to do IPv6, to start with their deployments. The funny thing is, the irony is, after these two providers actually started rolling out IPv6 to their end users, not in the pilot but in production, they dismantled their IPv6 task force. They said, our job is done for the IPv6 task force. Let's discuss more broader topics and converted that in GRNOG. So GRNOG first was the National IPv6 Task Force. If you like gaming, I can recommend the presentation they did in April this year from Fortnite in the link down there. It's quite an attractive way of presenting how they did their IPv6 in a very funny and, yeah, for gamers, funny way. Then Estonia. Estonia has one really big provider in the country, and that is ST Telecom. They worked on IPv6 for roughly 3-4 years behind the scenes, getting everything ready before they actually started going to the customers. But when they started with larger numbers. So they did a very small test, a few hundred users, and then they started immediately in production. So then you get a very steep increase on all the graphs going from 0% all the way up to where they are now. So that went pretty quick. So for the outside world, it looked like they just switched it on, but that was not really true because they replaced in the background quite large parts of their platform in order to support IPv6, but also to expand their capacity. So, we're going closer to home. We go to ENOG region. Yeah, and how ENOG is doing with IPv6. I was a bit surprised, to be honest. If you see the countries here, you see that Russia has end users in IPv6, and you see that Ukraine has some end users in IPv6. Both are well below the 1%. Russia is 0.7%, Ukraine 0.2%. All the other countries, like for example Belarus, Kazakhstan, there is no IPv6 for end users at the moment. So, that's the sad part of the presentation. So I delved a bit into this, and I focused on Ukraine, since we're here these 2 days. And we measure a couple of things as RIPE NCC ourselves. Who of you have heard of IPv6 ripeness? Some people, yeah, okay, not many people. So Axel told you that we have around a bit more than 12,000 members. And we know these members, and we know if they have an IPv6 allocation. And if they have an IPv6 allocation, they get 1 star. And if they announce that allocation, they get 2 stars. If they set up reverse DNS, they get 3 stars. And if they create a route object or route 6 object in the RIPE database, you get 4 stars. And then you will get a reference on our website, and we sent out t-shirts, IPv6 t-shirts. So, if we look at Ukraine, there are 197 members of RIPE NCC. 28% has got an allocation, but that's it, not doing anything. And the big blue chunk is 29%, and those are the LARs who did all those 4 things. So that doesn't mean that an end user has IPv6, it just means that they are announcing it, they have reverse DNS, they have a Route 6 object in the RIPE database. So that is all nice, and we see that, so actually 19% does not have an IPv6 allocation, so that means that almost 80% of those almost 200 LARs has an IPv6 allocation. That's not a bad number. But then what? So we have another measurement, and that's 5-star ripeness. 5-star ripeness. This is 4-star. This is 5-star. The 5th-star ripeness, what we measure is if you're actually doing IPv6 to what we call, not so nicely, eyeballs. End users or content, so access or content. And if I look at the Ukraine, there are some providers on here that, as you can see, there is quite some content available over IPv6. And again, that matches a bit with Svetlana's presentation yesterday. They're not only Quad A records, but actually people who go to their websites over IPv6. Access? Yeah, not so much, but we see some providers there. So this is the 5th star. But what happens if 13, and I have to say this number of 197 is not correct. The correct number is 105. So 105 LARs were announcing IPv6 in the global routing table, 105. 13 of them stopped. They switched it off. And I thought, oh dear, that's not good. We want to know what's going on. Sometimes, after a very long time, they switched off their IPv6 announcement. And we don't see that just happening in the Ukraine. We saw that happening in our whole region. So 2 weeks ago, I sent out a survey to 13 of these Ukrainian LARs, but in total 450 in the RIPE region. Why did you switch off IPv6? What's going on? Is there anything we can do to help? So I will make a report on the outcome of the survey at the upcoming RIPE meeting in Romania. So if you're interested to know why people are shutting off IPv6 from the global routing table, I will present there. So at the moment, I don't have a conclusion yet. So in the coffee breaks, if you are one of the 13 LARs that switched it off, I'm very interested to know why that was. Another thing that I found quite remarkable for Ukraine is the high number of AS numbers you have in the region. And Axel showed you this similar graph where we can see that 8.7% of those 1,600 AS numbers announced an IPv6 prefix. Now, I have an idea that this is mostly to do with the fact that there are quite a lot of provider-independent address blocks here in the Ukraine, and maybe there is a relationship with that PI holders, provider-independent block holders, don't have an IPv6 block yet. So maybe if you know PI holders that would be interested in actually having an IPv6 block and want to have that announced over their AS number, maybe have a chat with Marco Schmid in the coffee break about that as well, because maybe we should help the people that have an AS number but not IPv6 PI yet. Then I always get the question, yes, IPv6 is difficult, where do I have to start? And I tell people you have to start small. And IPv6 is not a big mountain that you have to climb in one day. You take baby steps. And with every good project, you need baby steps and learn along the way. So one of the things you can do, and Axel mentioned this as well, is the RIPE Academy. And the RIPE Academy has an IPv6 training course since June, where you can get a certificate for your knowledge. So if you visit an IPv6 training course, you get an certificate for coming, attendance, but with the Academy you can certify your knowledge. The modules are very easily explained. You don't have to be a master in English because we use a lot of graphics, step by step, to help you understand a bit with IPv6. Also, we are always available for any questions you might have or point you to good resources. And also, it would be good to share a bit of experience amongst each other. That never hurts. We saw in that top 10 from Akamai that the countries where they share knowledge with each other have higher deployment numbers. So that's an interesting thing to consider. Then that brings me to the conclusions. When I looked at the ENOG region, there is, of course, much to do. We also heard yesterday that there are other issues, more prominent issues at the moment that need to be resolved. But I would urge you to, if you have not done anything yet for IPv6, to at least start thinking about an IPv4 run-out plan. Because providers have told me that a good IPv6 implementation takes 2 to 3 years to do it right. So if you look at your IPv4 pool today, consider if that lasts you 2 to 3 more years. And if not, if you have to consider going to the market to buy more IPv4, or maybe already start with IPv6 and see where you can make some move there and have some customers getting used to IPv6. Contact us if we can help. I think all RIPE NCC staff put that in their presentation. We love to hear from you if you have suggestions and tips. Also, my email address is on the title slide of this presentation. So if you have questions later or suggestions, please feel free to contact me. I'm also happy to take any questions now if you have some.
Коллеги, какие-нибудь вопросы?